Alright YouTube, we are back once again to talk about some more video game rumors. Isn't that shit exciting? This time though, it's not us talking about the 9 Remake again. An update on that game if it exists. But it does involve Square Enix, and it is Parasite Eve. If you guys remember, like 2 years ago, Square Enix filed a trademark for something called Symbiogenesis, which got the community hyped because that directly relates to Parasite Eve and mitochondria. And I think the word Symbiogenesis is actually used within the game of Parasite Eve. So we were all thinking that it was like a remaster, a remake, another game, sequel, spinoff, whatever, something involving Parasite Eve. It ended up just being some more fucking NFT bullshit. Bring it up because it definitely got the community buzzing for a while, even if it was ultimately for all the wrong reasons, but it had to at least put it on Square Enix's radar that we're still interested in the IP. So I've been holding out hope for quite some time for something else from Parasite Eve, even realistically before the Symbiogenesis trademark, because I am a fan of the first game. I think I'll play the second game. I never played Third Birthday, thankfully, because I know these days that it's a trash-ass game. Before we get into this, I do want to say that initially this rumor did involve State of Play, and obviously nothing came from State of Play for Square Enix or Parasite Eve or whatever, so that aspect of this rumor itself doesn't really matter, but that doesn't negate the possibility of there being something for Parasite Eve at some point. So we're just going to read this bit from the comicbook.com article. It says, the source of this rumor comes from a leaker on A9VG forums named Zun. Zun's leaks have proven very reliable in the past, and the leaker is well known to users on Reset Era. Ahead of Sony's announcement, the leaker shared the date of the State of Play in a strange image with a thread title that translates to the hypnotic soprano. The image has a square piece of tofu with the letter E in it, leading to speculation that a Square Enix game will be announced. Between those two elements, fans are thinking that we could see something based on Parasite Eve. This is often the case on this channel. This is another leaker that I've never heard of, but everybody says that they're a reliable source, all the articles that I've read about this and stuff. So they've been, good in the past, but obviously the State of Play aspect of their rumor here didn't happen. I will say in regards to the State of Play thing, other than the date itself, they never really said anything. They didn't say, like, for sure this is going to be here. Maybe, like, they have info on, like, a Parasite Eve game, and we're just expecting it to be a State of Play, and obviously that didn't happen. It's also possible that there was supposed to be something for Square Enix, something for Parasite Eve at State of Play, and that got pulled for whatever reason. That does happen sometimes, too. And that's not me just trying to, like, grasp at straws and make this rumor any more real. That just does happen sometimes, right? But ultimately, their post is very vague. I don't know if they have the history of doing, like, vague stuff like this when it comes to leaks. But other than the State of Play date itself, it was just the hypnotic soprano and a square piece of tofu and the letter E. Like, we tried to extrapolate something from that, right? And I do think, Square Enix makes some sense. The hypnotic soprano relating to Parasite Eve makes sense. Because the game does open up the first game anyways with an opera, right? So, like, that all adds up. But I do question why a piece of tofu. That is kind of weird. When I think of video games and I think of tofu, the first thing that comes to mind is Resident Evil. The old Resident Evil games where you could go around as a fucking piece of tofu fighting stuff. And like, you could make that make some sense for Resident Evil because it's a piece of tofu and the letter E. E could be for evil, Resident Evil, tofu, evil, I don't know. But then, like, where does the hypnotic soprano relate to Resident Evil? So it's like, that doesn't really make sense. So, like, again, Parasite Eve seems most likely according to what little info we have. And that's really kind of it right now for this because there's a very vague post. Nothing came of it of State of Play, but there seems to maybe be something for Parasite Eve potentially in the future at some point, which would be nice. Even if they simply just, like, remastered the first game, I guess probably second game too, whatever you do with Third Birthday, don't really give a shit. I wouldn't mind a remake of the first game to see some of those scenes in, like, these, like, modern day graphics, right? Like some of those insane monster transformations and shit. I wouldn't mind seeing that with the graphics we have now. You're damn right. I want to see that shit in 4K. Also, Eve's boobs in 4K would be pretty good too. I do actually want to add to the video too that there's been this, like, kind of like misconception for a long time that Square Enix can't do anything with Parasite Eve. It's kind of different things depending on where you look at. Some people think they can't do anything with it at all, or it's like Aya Brea is the original creation, so they can do something with Aya Brea but not Parasite Eve, or they can do something with Parasite Eve, they just can't call it Parasite Eve, which is why the Third Birthday is called the Third Birthday, which a lot of that just doesn't even make sense and isn't even really true. For starters, Square Enix filed the trademark for Parasite Eve in Europe back in 2018. They also filed the trademark for Parasite Eve in the UK in 2019. It seems like for most, if not all countries, trademarks last 10 years. You gotta renew them every 10 years, right? So those trademarks specifically are still alive. I don't think or know if Square Enix holds the trademark for Parasite Eve in every single country everywhere or whatever the fuck. I don't know if I can't really find that. I do find, like, some of their trademarks for Parasite Eve on, like, Justia, and some of it, depending on what it is, it's abandoned and it's live elsewhere and it's live in other countries besides, like, the UK and Europe and stuff and, like, in Canada and shit. It's kind of all over the place, so it's kind of hard to get, like, a concrete answer on exactly what the trademark situation is when it comes to Square Enix. But obviously they couldn't file trademarks for Parasite Eve in Europe, in the UK, in Canada, if they didn't have some sort of access to the IP still. So that's just factually untrue. Also, at the end of, like, 2023, they did a fucking crossover event in Final Fantasy Brave EXVIUS with Parasite Eve. It's not Final Fantasy Brave Exvius X Iabrea. It's Parasite Eve. I don't really know where like the narrative comes from that Square Enix can't do something with Parasite Eve. Yeah, I haven't been following the franchise like that. It's just I played the first game back in the day on PS1, really enjoyed it. It's kind of it. It's not a franchise I've been following my entire life. So I don't know all the ins and outs of this discussion really. But everything that I can find points in the direction that Square Enix can still do kind of what they want, at least to a certain degree, right? Actually looking into the Square Enix Parasite Eve stuff, I came across a post on Twitter from I Finished a Video Game, which is a channel I really like, that kind of goes into more detail on this, and I think it's just worth reading his entire tweet. So he says, there's a strange belief that Square Enix has somehow lost the rights to Parasite Eve, or that the original author Hideki Senna hates the games and is blocking a re-release. This is factually incorrect, and I can't believe people are still repeating it. One, Square Enix categorically still holds the rights, and anyone can see this if you look at public registers. They renewed their filings as recently as 2019 in the EU and UK. Two, the third birthday did not have to be renamed because of a loss of the rights. Tetsuya openly told interviewers that this was because he considered it to be separate from the first two games and wanted to become its own series. Three, Parasite Eve has been re-released. In 2011 and 2019, the first and second games were put on PSN, and the first was included on the Japanese PlayStation Classic. Both releases would be impossible without the rights or with the co-owner who is trying to block your usage. 4, there's literally zero sources to back up the claim that Hideki Senna dislikes the games. All he has said about them is that he wasn't involved in their creation, but this was the same for the movie adaptation and does not indicate any sort of animosity. The reason we don't have another Parasite Eve game is because nobody at Square Enix wants to make one. All the people who championed the original games have either left or moved on to other projects. It's depressing, but it's the actual truth. All sources are included below. I did want to read all that, but I don't know how much of it is true. Obviously, the trademark stuff is true. We already looked at that. Already discussed that. Nomura talking about the third birthday, like he links to a particular little tiny article. He does mention in the article that it's not really a part of the first two games, but he doesn't necessarily say that you want it to be its like own franchise or whatever. So this is the entire Nomura quote in the article. It says, the plan for this game was written many years back. We felt that we'd need a system that would show uniqueness from the third-person shooter games that were being released in abundance overseas. We came up with the Overdrive system. But now a variety of third-person shooter games are coming out. We felt that we'd need something that's more unique for this title, and we recently decided to add the clothing system. It's something that could not be done with a rugged main character, something that would only work with Aya. There are many who call it Parasite Eve 3. However, it's not a sequel in the Parasite Eve series, but a new piece of content called the Third Birthday. The tense battles that have a horror action style, the event scenes which aim to be the highest level on PSP, the cut-ins that are made with overseas movies in mind, we believe you'll be able to enjoy a somewhat adult world. So yeah, I don't really get from that quote that like Nomura was hinting at, like he wanted the Third Birthday to be the kickoff to a brand new series of games. But he does say that, he doesn't really consider it a sequel to the first two games, which, doesn't really make a lot of sense since it is Iabrea. I don't remember the full story of the game. It's something to do with like her sister, right? Because I know her sister was like the super boss or something in the first game. When you do like the Chrysler building or whatever, like she's the last boss you fight or whatever. She's like super hard. And I think it's something involving her sister potentially in Third Birthday. I don't really remember. Or like Iabrea is dead the whole time. It's all a dream. I don't remember what the fucking twist was. As for like whether or not Senna likes the games or whatever, like he does link to an interview with C Theory, whatever the hell that is. And Senna does talk about, all the different adaptations of Parasite Eve, and he does mention that, the games are a sequel to his book. He doesn't say one thing, positive or negatively towards that. He just mentions that it is a sequel. And trying to look into whether or not Senna is a fan of the Parasite Eve games or not, I do come across Reddit posts from like last year before, people in the Parasite Eve subreddit asking this question about whether or not he did or didn't like it. What's the source of this? There are people in the replies that try to claim that, Senna wasn't necessarily a fan of the games, but can't link to anything. And they, somebody claims that it's like maybe behind NDAs. You can't really find anything on Google. And it's like, if you can't source this shit, then where does the claim come from? Like, if you can't show me a screenshot or a link to an article or an interview, a video, whatever, of Senna saying, he wasn't particularly a fan of the games, then this is a baseless claim, right? There's also people in some of the replies claiming that there's an older interview as well of Senna talking about being a fan of the first game. I also can't really find that. There's just, a lot of claims and no sources, but I thought I'd mention that as well. So there's like conflicting claims, right? He doesn't like it, he does like it. So that's really kind of it for the video, but I want to talk about the second half involving like, Square Enix and the rights and whatever, because if I didn't address that, there'd probably be people in the comments talking about it, right? Whether or not, Square Enix is legally allowed to, or whether or not Senna's blocking them or doesn't like the games. I don't claim to know the whole truth, right? But I'm just want to present the information that I'm able to find for this video. And kind of regardless of whatever we talked about here towards the end of the video, Square Enix did file trademarks for Parasite Eve in other countries as recent as 2018 and 2019, right? And then they also did a crossover event with Brave Exvius as recent as the end of like 2023, right? Not even 2 years ago at this point. So there's clearly not some sort of animosity that I can find between Square Enix and Senna. Or some sort of like loss of rights or whatever, because they're still doing something with the IP. And if the rumor that we discussed towards the beginning of the video holds any sort of weight at all, maybe we'll see something from Square Enix and or Parasite Eve in the near-ish future. Anyways, that's the video. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. Search networks in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @YT. That's it. My cat's biting my arm. Bye.
Used to care what people thought. but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame, we blow that. Like Coltrane, we in here. Like Rogaine, or leave it. Like Cobain.